session is policies, plans, and perspectives of bus operators. And like I said earlier, we'll hear from three leading bus operators today. And this session will be moderated by Chris Lee, who is owner and transport specialist at Delta Bus Consultancy. So I'm going to invite Chris to sort of take over and sort of take controls of the virtual floor. Over to you.
Oh, thank you very much, Moderator. Can you all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. Good, excellent. Well, we've got three excellent presentations coming up. We've got solving the Rubik's Cube to decarbonise the fleet by Garry Birmingham from First Bus. The importance of planning and partnerships by Arriva by Matthew Green, and delivering modal shift with zero-emission buses from Stagecoach's Peter Stevens. So let me start with Garry. Garry is First Bus Programme Director for the decarbonisation delivery. He focuses on decarbonisation of transport. He's had 31 years within the transport industry, starting at UPS, and started out as an apprentice mechanic where he was promoted through a variety of roles. He's held senior roles in First Bus in procurement, business change and engineering, and is most recently managing director for the First South Yorkshire. So we're really excited to hear Garry's puzzling subject of Rubik's Cube for decarbonising buses. Thank you so much, Garry, for taking your time out to join us today. And I'm going to hand over to you for your presentation.
Chris, I see Garry was here, but I think he did drop off. Should we start with the next presentation while we get Garry back online?
We'll do that. Yeah.
Yeah, just to save time.
So Matthew there?
Yes.
I'm here. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Matthew. Thank you so much.
No.
Okay, we'll come back to Garry a bit later on. So Matthew, do tell me if I've got you or your bio correct here. First of all, thanks very much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And your presentation is going to be on the importance of planning and partnerships from Arriva. I'm hoping that's correct.
Correct, yeah.
Wonderful, I got the right one then. So, Matthew, you joined Arriva around 2017 as head of fleet management, and had the responsibility of setting and delivering Arriva's fleet acquisition and utilising strategy. You took up the role of Arriva's Zero-Emission Institute Director, and now responsible for setting a direction for the strategic approach to delivering zero-emission bus fleets. I'm hoping that's correct.
Yep.
Oh, wonderful. Right. So before you did that, you had various senior roles within the transport sector, fleet optimization, utilization, life cycle management, etc. So you're very well placed in the bus industry to tell us about how we can go ahead in the future, because you've had such an excellent background in the past. So I'm going to say to you, away you go, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen. Let me see if you can see that. Can you see my screen now?
I can.
Fine, let me put on presentation mode. So let me just introduce a little bit about Arriva Zero Emission Institute and the role that I take. And I won't dwell too much on this because it's not meant to be a sales opportunity, but Arriva operate across 13 different markets in Europe. And what we have is a wealth of knowledge and experience within that business. So we operate zero emission vehicles in most of those markets. And what my team are looking to do is build on that experience and share that knowledge and best practice, both internally and to work with clients externally as well. So we've got that capability and that ability to deliver and give best practice, best advice, and see what the right solutions are for our customers and our clients going forward. So that's just a very, very high level view of what my teams and my ambition is, as I say, to support in multiple different areas. But if we then talk about the transition, and this is about partnership and working together, and the key for us that we see from the outset is that we set very clear objectives. We have common objectives. When we're working with our clients, when we're working and making sure we can deliver it, let's know what we want to deliver. Is it clean air? Is it zero emission? Is it value for money? Is it improved service, etc.? So let's set those objectives and understand what we can deliver. But if we don't do this in conjunction with each other, we've set ourselves up to fail. The other thing that we see is really important is long-term decision making as well. We've seen and experienced where every 3, maybe 5 years, we're being asked to deliver a different technology in the same depot. The life cycle of a bus traditionally in the UK would be 15 years, but if every 5 years we're being asked to deliver a different technology solution, what that potentially ends up is we have a depot full of diesel buses, gas buses, hydrogen buses, electric buses. Really inefficient because you've got to charge, you've got to maintain the infrastructure, you've got to train all your staff in different ways, and your supply chain becomes longer and deeper. So there's inefficiencies in there. So that long-term ability for us to plan and stick to those plans. I'm not saying we shouldn't change them occasionally, but don't every so often keep changing them. And finally, for us, output-based specifications. If we're dictated to what the bus has to look like, what the bus has to feel like, and what the technology type is from an operator's point of view, potentially our clients don't get the best value for money, because what we can't do is optimize our fleet. When demand goes up or demand goes down, if we've got a level of standardization, that means we as an operator can flex our fleet and move it around our network, and then that ultimately reduces the dependency and the cost to our clients as well. The other thing that we have to think about is planning, advanced planning. And again, we cannot sit here if we're transitioning to, let's just take electric buses. If we're transitioning to electric buses, what we cannot do is just simply expect that the same routes, the same timetables, the same product offering can be offered across our network as it was before. We have to work with each other. We have to think about where those routes can go. We have to look about the total kilometers a vehicle can drive. How are we going to charge the vehicle? What time have we got available to charge it? If we need to think about opportunity charge, for argument's sake, can we flex timetables? Can we move timetables? So again, if we've been given a prescribed list of actions that we've got to deliver on very fixed routes, for argument's sake, we might have challenges because we might need more buses to deliver that. So again, the message from us is that we want to work in partnership. We want to work together. This is deliverable, very much deliverable, but if we're dictated to what is the requirements are, that might give cost challenges or greater challenges. So let's have an open conversation about what we want to deliver and how we can deliver that. I think the technology choice is interesting as well, and there's pros and cons of both. We're operating electric buses. We've got hydrogen buses in Arriva. We've made commitments to order more hydrogen buses in the UK as well. So as you heard earlier, I think we've got to be mindful of the different technologies and the options that the different technologies bring. I think we've got to be open and honest and face up to those challenges as well, because we see battery electric as the market leader at this point in time, but hydrogen is coming along. We've got to test the technology. We've got to see where it can and can't fit, but it potentially comes with those cost challenges as well. So we're saying, again, let's work together. Let's make sure we pick the right technology. But if we're then planning for the future, how do we make sure we can be trialing? How can we be testing the alternative fuels and the alternative technologies that come along as well? So again, we've got to think about that. And with the likes of hydrogen at this point in time, it's great that we're investing in hydrogen, but the long-term certainty on green hydrogen, the cost of hydrogen, etc., similar to electric to a certain degree, but you have the benefits of the long-term electric pricing being lower than diesel. At the moment, hydrogen pricing is so high and there's a lack of green hydrogen. We've got to think about that and make sure we can plan for the future and not be stuck with a technology where we can't get the right cost of fuel and the right type of fuel, the green fuel, into those vehicles in the future as well. The other thing, the way we have to work together, it's not just about working with our clients. We have to think about the energy, the grid connection, and this is obviously about electricity, but it's almost a postcode lottery at this moment in time with regards grid connectivity. If you've got a depot in the right location that's right next to a substation that's got spare capacity, then the cost of that can be relatively low. But if you've got a railway line or a river or major roads going through between the substation to your depot, there's potential complexity. It takes a huge amount of time, takes a huge amount of money and planning to be able to make sure that we can make that work. Therefore, working with the DNOs, the distribution network operators, understanding what is capable, working with specialist people, again, not within the bus industry, but within the energy sector. How can we maximize? How can we work together to identify where those opportunities sit? Equally, I think what's really important and something that needs to grow and grow fast is how do we potentially share that capacity as well? As bus operators, generally speaking, we will need the energy between, let's just say, 10 o'clock at night and 6 o'clock in the morning. Well, how can we share that network capacity with like-minded individuals that want to decarbonise their fleets or potentially want to have that capacity coming into their production facility for a factory, for argument's sake? So how do we work and how do we partner with other businesses and other industries? So if we're looking to increase the power demands in our depot, but we only need it for 8 hours a day, can others then share that during the rest of the day that puts less of a drain on that total demand, on that total network for power? So again, there's a real importance that we think wider than we have historically and start embracing and partnering and working with other industries to see how we can deliver this faster and more efficiently as well. Equally, when we're talking about partnerships, depot design, it's something we've had a depot, we've operated a depot, we've run diesel buses out of that depot for the last God knows how many years. Actually, this is a totally different way of thinking. You need additional space. So where we're blessed with lots of space outside, it's less of a problem. However, in main cities where we've got depots that are tight on space, potentially we have to think differently. We have to work with planners. We have to work with our partners to identify what's the best way to optimize that depot space. Where do we put our charging infrastructure? It takes up space. Where do we put the charges itself? How do we put the buses in? Where do we park the buses? How do we rotate the buses? What different technologies are available to actually limit and reduce that space? So there are different opportunities because you might be able to put pantographs, mini pantographs on the top to reduce the footprint in the depot. But a real example, and again, what we've experienced in Arriva is that we've seen a 20% reduction. In one of our depots, we will see a 20% reduction in that footprint in that depot, purely and simply because we have to make the space and accommodate the zero emission vehicles in those as well. So these are considerations we've got to do and work with OEMs, infrastructure providers and more to make sure we can maximize the space that we have. So I guess where I'm coming from and where we're at this moment in time is that there's a huge amount of benefit in collaboration. If we really want to deliver value for money, we have to think about how we work together. If we can standardize to a certain degree, we can be more flexible in our business. We can potentially get economies of scale by working with OEMs, or we can have more buses available where we spread them across different contracts and different regions that are of similar builds, similar specification. Then obviously that means that we might be able to help minimize cost. It means that we're more efficient with our engineers, because if we've got the same sort of vehicles, our engineers are trained better on the right vehicles. Again, working along these lines and thinking about how we work is all about making sure that we can deliver value for money for our customers and value for money for our clients as well. And I said it before, managing our fleets is really important. If we can flex our fleets, if we're being asked to have a electric minibus service in the northwest of England, and we've got a 18-metre bus service in the southeast of England, how can we mix that fleet in the long term? How can we make sure we can do that? It's almost impossible. Therefore, again, that commonality, not of supplier, but of specification and types of specification and vehicle types, I think is really important to allow us to maximise and manage our fleets accordingly. And finally, what are our key learnings? It takes longer. Mobilisation takes longer than traditional vehicles. We've got to think about that. Infrastructure, and it's different region by region. And if I look country by country that we've got within Arriva, it could take us 2 years to get the grid connection from one location into our depots. So what we can't be asked to do is turn something around in 6 to 12 months. Again, looking at the way that we're delivering hydrogen projects, you might have to put temporary hydrogen storage facilities in before you can actually build the full infrastructure that you need on site. So we've got to make sure that we understand this isn't a quick turnaround. It takes longer to deliver a zero emission fleet than it does a diesel fleet. And that's got to be represented as we move more towards tendered markets and tendered contracted business. We've got to think about the charging strategy infrastructure locations. Do we need it? Is it all in depot? Do we want some charging infrastructure on roads? Where do we house that? What do we need to do? What planning permissions might we need to have? So again, we have to think about this in advance and make sure that we're planning accordingly and making sure that we're working with our clients and the relevant organisations that they can influence to make sure, if required, we can get the relevant planning permissions to deliver the service and the requirements that they need. And finally, the big thing for me as well, from a cost point of view, I say, if you're having this conversation or this presentation 9 months ago, getting to life cycle cost parity with an electric vehicle was a lot easier. The fact of the matter is that the electric price has gone up, diesel price haven't gone up in as quickly. Therefore, we are now facing a greater challenge to get to that life cycle cost parity over the usual economic life of the vehicle, let's just say 15 years. So there's massive challenges there. So we have to work together to find out how we can transition and how we can bridge that gap. We've got to, as operators, got to be given the opportunity to make those long-term investments. Giving us a 5-year contract, for argument's sake, or 5-year concession, doesn't allow us to amortize that vehicle over the length of the contract. So we've got to, again, think about how long these vehicles will last. We're going to have to change batteries in years between probably 7 and 10. So that, again, we've got to make sure we're doing the right thing economically. And finally, depot space, like we've said, it puts constraints on our depot space. So again, if we're losing depot space and less vehicles, our costs to serve are going up as well. So we're seeing all these challenges that we need to face. It's not saying that we can't overcome them, but we've got to put them on the table and work through them and work in partnership with our clients and our supply base to make sure we can deliver the sustainable fleet that we want to in the future. So that's just the vision from an Arriva's point of view. I will hand over as required and take any questions later on through the session.
Thanks, Matthew. That was most enlightening. Certainly from me as an infrastructure specialist, one of the things that I realised or was thinking about last night was that if you've got a conventional depot with diesels in it, the diesels have the power and the range to go to like one end of the city and start a route that goes right to the centre and to the other end of the city. But you can't do that with batteries at the moment because they haven't got that technology. So you've got to, as you said, rethink outside the box. Do we have outstations? Do you have bigger vehicles? Do you have charging points in the middle? So a whole load of exciting and lots of food for thought on conventional issues.
And I think I'm not so nervous about that. For generally speaking, probably 80% of your traffic, if not more, can be done with a battery electric bus at this point in time with an overnight charge. You can get buses that can do 350 plus kilometers in a day. So you should be able to deliver your daily service with a battery electric bus. But there are challenges if you need to go above that, which is why we need to look at alternative technologies as well.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Right. If I can move on to our next speaker, that would be great. We're talking to Peter Stevens from Stagecoach, and Peter's going to talk to us about delivering modal shift with zero-emission buses. Peter joined Stagecoach as the Director of Policy and External Affairs, and was head of the UK External and Government Affairs for a number of years, 5 years. So he's been working on the uptake of electric vehicles and joined Nissan in 2015 as a civil servant for the UK Department of Business. So again, lots of experience in the background of the zero emission here, and we're intrigued, Peter, to hear how you're going to take us forward into the future. So I'm going to hand over to you for your presentation.
Much, Chris, and thanks to Matthew for lining up and taking half the points I wanted to make, which is great. So a lot of commonality there. So a little bit about Stagecoach. We're one of the largest bus and coach operators in the UK. We have about 180 battery electric buses in our fleet at the moment in London, Surrey, Scotland, and we also have hydrogen with more to come as well. So we've got a range of technologies. Namrata's put a challenge down about equity and inclusion, and I hope I'll be able to pick up some of that as we go on. But what I wanted to do was, first of all, I wanted to cover off some work that we did earlier on in the year. I think this came out just about the time of the Amsterdam conference around a roadmap to zero, and then talk about a second project that will be published next month. So you're going to get a sneak preview of some more research that we're looking to publish next month. But the Roadmap to Zero project was a project really to inform the next stage of policy development as we roll out zero-emission buses. And I think the concern that we've got is that scaling up from what in the past has been small-scale projects of 30 buses here, 40 buses there, to actually convert whole depots and whole operating companies was going to bring a new set of challenges. And Matthew's already talked about some of the short-term nature of the way that the projects are being delivered at the moment, and some of the challenges that we're going to have as we actually try and electrify or move to zero emissions for our entire fleets. So the report itself focused on some very practical issues around deployment, the issues Matthew's already touched on around working with DNOs in partnership to try and get the power where you need to get it, the challenges around changing depots to reflect kind of the parking space that was going to be required. But we also wanted to pick up the customer angle, because quite often any discussion around zero-emission buses usually ends up a discussion about AC versus DC charging, range, battery chemistry, and focuses on a lot of technical issues. But actually we need to remember the customer in all of this, and we've got to take the customer with us on the journey that we're going to go through. So the report itself was informed by a survey of just over 2,000 adults, and a mix of regular bus users and those who were not regular bus users. And we asked questions around why people didn't use the bus. So looking at non-users in particular, why they didn't use them. And it's not a surprise that the main issue that came out was around the availability of bus coverage for the journeys that they wanted to make. At the time we did the research, so this was during the Omicron outbreak, which was coming out of that, there was still a real concern around the health issues and in concern around catching disease on board, and also then you wouldn't be surprised to see issues around fares coming on as well. So those are some of the reasons why people weren't using the bus at the moment. We then asked about how they viewed this move to zero-emission buses. And rather encouragingly, most people felt that it was a good thing. A bit surprised that 11% think it was a bad thing, but there was general support in the population for a move towards zero-emission buses. Interestingly, it was seen as positive more amongst those over 65 than those aged 18 to 24. So some demographic issues there, and perhaps a bit more resistance amongst the 18 to 24s, with 23% of them seeing it's a bad thing, which kind of surprised me a little, given the general received wisdom that young people tend to be more environmentally aware than the older generations. So we asked then about what difference people felt that zero-emission buses would make. And unsurprisingly, the main issue the main benefit that they saw was around air quality and improvements to air quality. They also cited the onboard experience, so the fact that zero emission buses are cleaner and quieter. Perhaps more interesting is the link to frequency, punctuality and service coverage. And I think for me that just raises a question around, are we raising expectations about what zero emission buses will be able to deliver, and what is common to both zero emission and diesel buses in terms of the challenges around frequency. And I think one observation I've made coming off the back of this is that a zero emission bus that is stuck in traffic is still a very expensive zero emission bus stuck in traffic. And given the costs of operating zero emission buses, it is critical that we get bus priority in place as well, so that actually those buses are used to optimum efficiency. So we need to make sure that they really are operating at peak efficiency, which means the measures around bus priority that set out in enhanced partnership agreements, those really need to be delivered. And at the same time, given the increased costs of operating zero emission buses at the moment, particularly with energy prices, we really need to make sure we are filling those buses as much as we can. So the measures included in bus service improvement plans about increasing patronage, getting more people onto the bus, I think that's going to be critical as well to making these a success. We also asked then about what difference the move to zero emission buses would make on how people use the bus. And a move to zero emission buses would increase bus use to 22%, so around a quarter of respondents, particularly those who are already bus users. So those who are already using the bus are more likely to use the bus as a result of this. And here we do see an age difference with 18 to 24s in particular, more likely to use bus as a result of introducing zero emission buses. So I think for operators and local authorities, there's a real opportunity here that when we implement zero emission buses, when we roll them out, when we get them on the street, there's a real opportunity there to do some marketing and promotions alongside that to try and make sure we're capturing as much of that potential new custom as possible. We also asked then about the cost of zero emission buses and how those get recouped. And in particular, what level of fare increases to fund the transition to zero emission buses would deter passengers from using the bus. And we found that if we modelled a 10% increase in fares to fund the transition, around about a third of respondents would use the bus less. And that increases the more that you raise the fares to recoup the costs of implementing zero emission buses, the less people use the bus. And the concern that this raises for me is that we could see a situation where we could decarbonise our entire fleet and yet road transport emissions go up because people are switching away from using public transport and zero emission buses in particular and using private cars more because of the costs. So there was a real challenge here in terms of trying to use the introduction of zero emission buses to build patronage, but at the same time, if we have to increase fares to recoup the cost, then we risk switching people off using buses. So that was the key findings from the piece of work that we did earlier on in the year about how we can use the introduction of zero emission buses to increase modal shift, increase people using the bus. We've just been working on a new project around modal shift that we wanted to just give you a sneak preview of some of the headline messages that are coming out from this. And we wanted in particular to focus on the willingness of car drivers to think about switching their mode of travel for specific journeys. And I think one of the challenges, as soon as you start talking about modal shift, you get accused of being anti-car when the car is, for some people, the only mode of transport that they have available, and for others, it's the most appropriate mode of transport for many journeys. So we wanted to try and look at modal shift and the decisions that people make around the mode of transport that they use through a lens of specific journey purposes. And I think for us, we felt this was a bit of unfinished business from the National Bus Strategy and from the Transport Decarbonisation Plan. There's a lot in there that's really good about encouraging people to use bus more, but we felt there's a bit of a missing piece here about how do you disincentivize car use when there's a more appropriate form of transport that's available. And we've also seen ambitions in both Scotland and Wales to reduce car mileage. And so really we wanted to try and inform that. So we did a representative sample of 4,000 car drivers, all of whom live within a 15-minute walk of public transport. And we also then supplemented that with some deep dive into a case study in Oxfordshire to get a sense of what lies behind the headline statistics. And we asked them about the typical journeys that they make, the reasons why they choose the car, and what may encourage them to switch away from their car for those journeys. And so the sample base, it was about 70% of UK adults live within 15 minutes of transportation and drive a car. Of those, 81% have already changed journeys as a result of high fuel prices. So the field research for this was done in July and August, when we had the fuel price spike, but we were already seeing people making choices around the mode of transport and how they use their car to reflect the fuel costs. And of that 81%, 2/3 of them are already using different modes. So it wasn't just about reducing the number of times they use the car, but it was also then about switching into other modes of transport. So we asked about what sorts of car journeys do people make, and it roughly breaks down. We asked around 5 kind of categories, and if you combine the school run with personal activity, so things like leisure activity, going to the gym, doctor's appointments, and so on, if you lump those together, they roughly fall into 4 quarters, roughly the same size. So commuting at 1.1 billion miles a week, social, so going out to socialise or a day out, that's about 1 billion. Shopping, just under 1 billion miles there, and then personal activity and school run combined come to just about 1 billion as well. So those are the sorts of car journeys that people are making. We then asked about what the factors were when they made those choices. So for shopping, it was the practicality. It was, were you able to park near the shops? Were you able to handle the bags that you might have? It was about the practicality of the journey that meant you chose the car. For commute, it was about cost. And for me, what was interesting was the school run, and it was about the timing. And having tried to round up small children to get them onto a bus in time for school, I understand why timing there and time pressure means that quite often the car is used for that journey. So the interesting thing for me here is that you have a different factors go into those journey decisions, and therefore in thinking about the policy interventions to change the driving patterns, they're going to vary by journey type. And then we looked at the willingness to switch journeys away from car to other modes of transport by journey type. Interestingly, the school run was the one where people said they were most open to thinking about using alternative modes of transport, followed by personal activity, personal business, so those leisure trips, those trips to the gym, those trips to the doctor, etc. And shopping was the one that they were least willing to think about switching in terms of practicality around that. So the other thing that the report then went on to look at policy measures that you can introduce, so things like bus priority, things like clean air zones, and things like flat fares. So some of the measures that you can introduce, and one of the findings that comes out and can be in the main report is that actually that you get most modal shift where you combine a measure to encourage bus use with a measure to discourage the use of the private car. So when you have this balanced approach of both push and pull measures, that seems to work most effectively. So I guess the message for local authorities and operators is that when you're introducing a pull measure, like the introduction of zero-emission buses, actually you're going to have most impact on modal shift if at the same time you include then a measure that discourages car use. So having that balanced package, it means it's more acceptable because people can see that the public transport offering is improving whilst you're discouraging or incentivizing people to move away from using their car. So in terms of conclusions, a few points just to draw out. there is significant support in the public for the deployment of zero-emission buses. We found that people view this as a good thing. At the same time, people expect that their core priorities when travelling by bus, so a reasonable fare, reliability, frequency of service, and comprehensive route coverage, those still need to be protected. That seems to be kind of the base, and that the zero-emission buses need to ensure that that is still delivered. As we've seen from the fare sensitivity, the cost of the transition can't be borne just by passengers. Otherwise, we'll see patronage go in the wrong direction and potentially emissions go in the wrong direction. Increasing patronage and increasing operational efficiency are going to be absolutely critical. So alongside the introduction of zero-emission buses, we need to see delivery of those bus service improvement plan measures to support the operating efficiency and boost patronage. Fleet decarbonisation is only one part of the puzzle. Actually, we need to incentivise this modal shift to lower carbon, higher occupancy modes of transport at the same time as we are decarbonising the bus fleet. And finally, modal shift incentives, where we're putting those in place, they need to focus on particular journey types, as there's a variety of decision-making factors behind the different choices of transport mode that people make. So thank you very much for your time, and I will hand back to Chris. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Peter. That was most enlightening. I'm here as an infrastructure specialist, and I keep thinking to myself, well, I'm sort of at the fish out of water when it comes to clean buses, but your presentation has just put that so much into focus. When you were talking about multi-million-pound bus stuck in traffic, it shows that you still need bus priority, and we still need to keep developing that bus priority so that these buses are economic for operators and passengers. And when you're talking about things like how do people use them, you know, we have to design the bus to receive the people with shopping bags and wheelchairs and pushchairs and stuff like that. That also means that we've got to keep redesigning the bus stops to ensure that they're welcoming and can handle the passengers as well. So there's this inextricable link between infrastructure and zero emission. It's just a whole new field of thought, and how we need to keep pushing everything forward at the same time. So thank you very much. That was most insight. Gave us a good insight into how everything links together. So we're going to come on to questions and answers at the end. So there's a couple of Q&As there, but I'm going to move on to our last presentation for this session, which is from Garry Birmingham of First Bus, and he's going to talk to us about how we solve the Rubik's Cube of decarbonising the fleet. As I said before, probably certainly, hopefully not too puzzling a presentation, but certainly one that we need to have a think about. So Garry is First Bus's Programme Director for Decarbonisation. He's also had a long career in the transport industry for about 31 years. Been promoted through various roles, starting off as apprentice mechanic and coming up through First Bus in procurement, business change, engineering, and again, like all the other speakers, he's very well experienced, had the experience in the past of the bus industry to be able to take it forward into the future. So Garry, can we get on, continue with your presentation, please? That'd be great.
Oh, sure, thank you. Hopefully you can see my slides, hopefully.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Right, yeah, hello, thanks for the introduction, Chris, and I'm very sorry for a few heart attacks I appear to have caused this morning. It's been a bit of a logistical nightmare, so I'm here now.
That's
So
not a problem at all.
So yeah, hi, I'm Garry Birmingham. I kind of probably know some of you. I've seen a few names that I recognise. So and some of this I've kind of said and done before. However, there's a little bit of an update, and at the end there's a bit of a video, so I'll skip through it. So the Rubik's Cube. So how do we do it? Vehicles, infrastructure, people, fears, etc. So bit of a background. So First Bus, we're one of the UK's largest bus operators. We operate in the 40 of the UK largest towns and cities outside London. Fleet size just under 5,000, and we have 64 operating depots, 60% of which we own, which is kind of a good thing. You don't have to ask for permissions, but it's one to consider, is what I will say. We publicly committed to operate a zero-emission fleet, and added that to carbon neutral depots and all our facilities by 2035, which is a big ask. It's not that far away. And this year is the last year we will purchase any diesel buses or any ICE buses, is what I'll say, new ones. We do have an ambitious decarbonisation roadmap to grow our business, and we look at that building capacity, securing jobs, and actually increasing job opportunities to a new stage. We are, as everyone else is, dependent on funding currently. The buses are way expensive compared to its diesel equivalent, and simply to get power to site is basically a postcode lottery. I think most people have learned that by now. We have, however, done quite a large one. So I call it the Pathfinder, which is in Caledonia. If you don't know where that is, it's in Glasgow, and it is currently the UK's biggest DC. And that is a good one, DC, rapid charging hub. And we've got over 80 DC chargers, and there will be over 150 battery electric vehicles operating by the end of the year. It might drift into the new year, but let's see. We are currently, or I am currently working to deliver another 7 sites with associated roughly 300 vehicles. And we plan to get this done in different tranches. But infrastructure spades are going in the ground as we speak, and I intend to get all these vehicles and all 7 sites converted, if not by late 23, definitely by early 24. So I'm quite a busy chap. So the Rubik's Cube and solving it, I kind of use the word because I can't do a Rubik's Cube. I can get one side and that's it. So I kind of then thought I need a few more brains more than mine. But we have to look at, and you have to look at examples that have been set and how you do it. There's varying options. So we have done some previous piecemeal learnings with some small trials. York, and I put AC there because that's AC charging. And in Leeds, we did a turnkey solution with Zenobē, and huge shout out to Zenobē. It's a great company. But from these learnings, we decided to do things a little bit different ourselves. But things to consider before you do any of these things, and it's what you currently do now, actually. So we have roughly 15,000 people work for First. What we've learned and what everyone else has learned in this last 6 to 12 to 18 months is that people coming into the bus industry, they're a little bit hard to find, and it's dependent on a few things. So a bit of a plea here, look after who you've got, and electrification. Yes, it means change, but you can't just change overnight. Time is probably the biggest word, what I'll keep coming back to on this call. So you're not going to do it overnight. So don't even think you can. Don't scare people. Don't kind of think that this is going to reduce your engineering from 10 people to 1 people. I challenge you all the way there. So please don't presume things. Look at your energy choice, because there's a few options out there, and it depends where you are in partnerships. EVs are easier to put on the ground and faster at the minute, but we have hydrogen vehicles in Aberdeen, and they're equally as good. So I think it all depends on green energy. So there's horses for courses. range is an issue currently, but maybe technology takes it to a different place. How you charge your bus and the infrastructure associated. Do you do it on site? Do you do it off site? Do you do it on road? Is it AC? Is it DC? Is it CCS plug? Is it pantograph? You've got lots of options. You're going to have to kind of look at this and think about this. Range is massive. It's a massive driver of what you do and what you can do. So you've got to consider it. Hills could be good, could be bad. Depot ergonomics. Is it a new site? Is it an old site? You've got to look at all these things. And the other pieces I kind of need to throw out there. In Caledonia, we will have 150 vehicles at the end of this year, all EV. What I will say is we've still got another 150 ICE vehicles still operating in that yard, and we still have to park them, fuel them, clean them, maintain them. If we all had sites with 5 buses in them, that's probably an easier transition. What I'm saying is that you're not just going to do this overnight, and you're not going to flick a switch and it all happens. You've got to look at this. Business as usual. In the early days, the amount of civil engineering companies I spoke with, what just thought we were going to move out while they got on with it. All these considerations, it's new to them, it's new to you, but actually cordoning off yards in the day, operating on a night the same, it's all got to be considered. Site safety, site security, it's essential you consider all these things. Employees, this is going to be a new skill set. An EV bus drives differently to an old diesel one, is what I'll say. That's appealing. It's easier. It should be better. We should be able to attract, more females into the industry, is what I'll say. It's to drive the buses, it's easier. It's not a really hard thing. Engineering, you're probably going to have a lot of workforce what I've currently worked and trained on diesels, petrols, you name it, electrics. There's less moving components, but there's still, 37, 68 seats on a bus. There's still lots of damage what can be done to a bus. So please, we've got to, as an industry, look at how we train, invest, bring people into the industry of different sectors, different sizes. It doesn't matter. Software. So, most bus companies, and we're not alone. We do a lot of interworking with systems on buses, but then lots of things are pen and paper. So an electric bus gives you more vision, is what I'll say, and probably more opportunities to look at it and watch how it's working and things. And then finally on this page, total cost of ownership. You need to understand what this looks like, or at least see it, and consider it. The next slide will probably shock a few people, but this, everyone, and myself included, we kind of know what happens or is going to happen to a diesel bus as it gets older and in its life, because we've had lots of them. Electric buses, we probably don't know, and time is going to be the indicator. We know batteries will wear out at some point, but what about motors, and what about other components, compressors, etc.? So moving on, infrastructure, technology considerations. I'm not going to read every word, and I've highlighted what is really standing off the page, which is timescales. And I cannot stress enough, you might be in control or think you're in control of lots of things, but lots of things you're not in control of. If you order a bus, it may take up to 12 months to come. We're all knowing what's happening in the automotive world for parts and components, so consider it. Infrastructure, it is a postcode lottery. In one of my locations in Scotland, we are currently digging 2.7 kilometers to the nearest substation. That takes time and it takes people. I'm not in control of that. These people don't work for me. So just understand your timelines. You need a relationship, collaboration, partnership, relationships. They are essential on how you do this. You've got lots of options to look at, but please, when you've done all this, consider the bottom left here, green energy. Are we going to do it and then, dare I say, have generators producing the electricity? I think or even hydrogen if it's not the right color. Please just think about what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do this. And again, I come back onto it, employees and how you communicate to employees. It's really essential. You don't scare people, and you use this proactively and positively, because this change is amazing, and we're going to be doing the right things for our children and our children's children's. This is what we're doing it for. Please don't scare people. Don't look at head counts and think you can just take them off. Maybe time will tell, but I think there'll be other things and other areas where people will have employment. So please look after the people. I've got on here things like cascades. When I've got a big fleet, I've got to think about the vehicle that comes in today and where that vehicle is going to live its life. There's lots of things here, and this slide will be shared. So please consider lots of things and how you do it. Total cost of ownership. Busy slide this, but behind the graph is lots of numbers and lots of bus OEMs is what I'll say. So I'm not naming and shaming because there's no reason to. I've got to take my hat off to everyone who we all know. The bus industry is striving to do this the right way. There's just lots of unknowns. We, as probably you have, I've got great partnerships with some great suppliers, some great historic relationships. Work with them, get to understand things, but the graph at the bottom does not like this minute. And I will point out, this graph is probably a year old now, when we're working again with the OEMs to work this out. But the orange line is what we know about diesels. It doesn't include fuel, so the blue line doesn't include the battery either. But what I will say is there are some costly components what are recognised, and they will fail across the bus's lifetime. That could be electric axles, it could be compressors, all these things will all add up compared to diesels. The reason the big spike is in the middle is because my accounting team, they work out anything what's going to fail potentially after year 8 up to year 16. They bring it back and put it as a midlife. So that's how it spiked. But in fairness to the OEMs, and we've all got to recognise this, there isn't a second-hand market currently for refurbishing, reworking, repairing heavy equipment such as axles, motors, etc. So everything what is in this is as new cost for replacement parts for the EVs. We all know if the engine goes in a diesel bus today, we have varying ways to repair it. Not very often do we put a brand new engine in it, is what I'll say. Usually it's reconditioned, etc. So if the OEMs are saying it's going to be this much over its lifespan, and when you do the work and it's looking, this piece of work looks like it's going to be more expensive, it's over here, I think the answer's in the middle. We just need, time's going to show us that. So please don't take this as 100% factual, but this is how we're looking at it. Again, this does not include battery replacement, and I keep saying it, engineering training is going to be needed. Labour savings are not in here because we don't know if there's going to be any labour savings, is what we'll say at this point. And the immaturity of this is making us kind of be cautious on how we do it. Again, I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's wrong, but these facts have been built up with the OEMs, not singular. So Caledonia, again, I'm not going to read every slide, but it is the UK largest bus garage, and we've got a capacity of 430 vehicles, ICE vehicles that is. So we know that current infrastructure takes space. That's why I've put the maximum current site capacity is. The site, and there's a bit of a picture after this, spans both sides of the M72. There's a tunnel underneath, and it's next to the main rail line. So it's a big site, but there's lots of considerations. However, what I will say, the consideration we didn't have is people and houses, because it's near no houses. So, lots of our sites are near houses. So, again, I'll shout out huge credit to Transport Scotland. They got this ball going and supported and funded, not just ourselves, others in Scotland, some on this call, through SULEB 1 and SULEB 2. A year ago, COP26 was happening, so that kind of helped as well. But but a really good example of what happens on site. The first spade in the ground was in July last year, and the site was ready in September. So actually for phase one, 11 charges, 22 vehicles, it was a very little time on site. So that's where all the driver and staff comms come through. However, the bigger piece of work on what we call the ski slope, that started in December of last year, and it was finished in around about April. So it was a bit more, but again, it's that consideration of when we're operating on site and when the civil engineering company had to operate on site. So we've worked hand in hand with SPEN, who is the DNO, and at the time we worked with Power Systems and SSE to actually put the cables in the ground and do the other things. We purchased all that equipment, and we've working with Hitachi to look at software solutions and about battery solutions for battery as a service. And our chargers, we use are Heliox, which are a Dutch manufacturer, and when we tested the water, that's who came out on top, and they are a great partner, is what I'll say. These are the pictures, and again, I'm flashing through this because there's a little video to take you through this. But basically, phase one is as you come in, and you can see on the left there, and then phase two with the 69 chargers are under a tunnel and around the back. We've also trialed some ceiling mounted chargers as a bit of a test in the engineering workshops to look at if we can do this elsewhere, to kind of evaluate the space elsewhere. So I'm going to play this video. It's a few minutes long, and I've got one slide after, so please don't lose me. So hopefully you can hear the sound when it comes on. Sound? No. No sound.
No sound, Gary.
Okay, bear with me. Okay, is there any chance anyone on the main desk could play the video with the sound on, please? And I spit off this.
Hi, Gary. Just let me check this for you. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. The video is worth it, by the way. It stops me talking and it's pictures.
You're restarting the video, Gary, right?
Yeah, I'm going to restart it. Yeah.
Great.
Oh, somebody's going to try and restart it for me. While we're trying to do that, I'll come on to my final slide. So the next 20 months of our Rubik's Cube is we won some Scots Evans Zebra funding, and it's allowed us to do some multiple deliveries. So we've currently got on order 268 vehicles across 7 locations, 2 in Scotland and 5 in England. So in Leicester, we will replace 2/3 of the fleet for sure by December 2023. But maybe that'll be 100%, and that will be our first all-electric depot. So carrying on from what was said previously, and we intend to implement the learnings from Caledonia, working with our existing partners. We are looking at full depot decarbonisation through renewable solutions. So I'm fitting solar panels to 20 locations before the end of this financial year, and we are looking also to use our sites to enable other charging solutions to business premier partners, one of which is Police Scotland, who we're working with in Caledonia currently. So we recognise that our sites could be an enabler for other people to use as well. So that's where I am. Nahir, sorry, I can't pronounce your name correctly. So has anyone been able to get my video going with sound, please?
Hi, Gary. I'm sorry about that. The video is not working at our end.
It's not working. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Can we have it without sound?
Yes, you can. Yeah, and we'll try and do that if that's all right. that, sorry, I'm playing around with this.
We could hear the sound.
Really excited to announce the completion of our Caledonia electrification project. It's been 9 months in the making, from spade in the ground to the first arrival of the electric vehicles. The site has been future-proofed to be fully electrified at some point in the future, and we have 88 dual-headed chargers here for those 150 buses.
Over to you.
Thanks, Gary. That was a really interesting presentation, and glad we got the sound on the video at the end. One thing that strikes me about all three presentations is that you've got the three biggest bus companies in the country, and in theory they're all competing against one another, but they've all got the same problems. So I'm hoping that if one of you makes a breakthrough in one part of the industry, then the other two will come to you and say, "Hey, how did you do that? Can you give us a hand and you know, share what you did?" And hopefully, I know you, because you're in competition, it's difficult sometimes, but the fact that you make the initial breakthrough in the first place would give you the advantage, and then hopefully you could share that information and knowledge with other companies and help the whole future of the industry. So if you want to comment on that, that's fine. If not, I'm just going to go straight onto the questions. But
I think from my perspective, as an industry, we all have to come together to try to understand how we can do this and face those challenges. So we've spoken about the DNO. I think the big challenge, we should all be working together to work with the distribution network operators to make sure that they make this easier and smoother transition. So I think there's opportunities to work together to influence the change that needs to happen.
I'd agree with that, Matthew. I think there's a whole ecosystem that is needed to deliver the change that we need. And that includes then charge point suppliers and vehicle suppliers. And I think that's going to be where one of the big pinch points is. And Gary's already talked about some of the challenges and delays in getting vehicles. Now, if First Go Ahead and Arriva all rock up and place orders for 120 buses at the same time that we do, then that's going to give some real supply chain challenges. So I think there does need to be a longer term framework so that we're not going project by project, feast to famine, that actually enables the supply chain then to plan around it and be able to ramp up production to meet the demand that we know is going to be coming.
Wonderful. Thank you for your insight on that. We've got about 10 minutes left for this session. So I'm going to whiz straight on to some of the questions that our participants have asked you. I'm going to start with a question for Matt from Soul Gold. If you have questions, can you pop in your role and company as well, so that we know what part of the industry the question is coming from? I think that'd be a good idea. So Saul says, are there companies that have shown interest in sharing the infrastructure, or is this a direction that you want or need to go into?
So in the UK with Arriva at this point in time, we haven't identified somebody, but I think Gary's already identified working with our clients. So local authorities, I think, are one of the key drivers that could be the first place to go, because we've got a vested interest. Gary said in Scotland, I think it was the police service that he's talking about. So as an industry, we've got to look at where we can and complementary businesses that can work across the Arriva network, wider than just the UK. Yes, we're looking to work with local taxi firms, delivery courier companies, etc., etc. So nobody's specific, but that's the type of industry that we're working and looking towards to work with.
Great, thank you, Matt. That seems to answer that fairly comprehensively. There's a question for Peter. Have you considered going into partnership with companies sitting in office parks? Yeah, so that's a good one, because an awful lot of office parks have van fleets and things like that. So delivery companies often share that. What's your view on that?
I think as Matt said, I think there are some real opportunities to look at the charging infrastructure that we're putting in place and how those could be used more widely. I think those discussions are still at quite early stages, and I think as we've already said, you know, the time that we need the charging, we need to find people who actually want to charge during the day. So that's kind of the challenge. We need to charge at night. We need to find people who can charge during the day. So if that's office parks. The other thing is around community charging as well. If there's scope that we can provide community charging as well, then that may be another opportunity.
Have anybody else any comments on that about sharing facilities?
Can I just add? So as an ex-MD of a bus company, what used to keep me awake at night is actually when the last bus got home. So site safety and site security is essential. So please, this and it is a plea as well. It's the people on the sites, we cannot endanger them anyway. So it's understand the risk before you bring anyone on your site, and that's where I will say priority partners are key. So I like blue lights on site for the right reason, clearly, but it's a deterrent, and the people driving the vehicles usually are trained. So just bear that in mind before you do anything, and think of the people on site who are going to have to manage the on-site things. So public people, i.e. Mrs. Birmingham, is not allowed on my site at all. But if a logistics company or a public service vehicle comes, if they want to come, that's fine, but we need to understand the risk, please. I beg you all to. It's not a silver bullet in this. This is not a silver bullet.
It's the old case of buses don't mix with things like taxis, delivery vehicles, cyclists, etc., because of the risk of safety risks involved.
Potentially have that opportunity to share or have different access, or if you've got enough land that you can utilize. So there's different ways of approaching it. But I think the other point that I was making as well is that if you're digging up the ground and other businesses need to get energy to their sites, how do we share that infrastructure and that civil works that needs to be going on as well? So I think what happens is we dig up the ground, put the cabling in, and then 6 months later somebody might need to do something different. You share that, so the DNO coming together to help support that initiative as well is vital to me, not just with the charging infrastructure itself.
Right, and another good point, which is yes, working with the whole of the industry to minimize the number of civil engineering works that are required. I've got a question here from one of our other participants. What does the panel think of the benefits of upcharging, or where do they see the most viable routes?
If you don't mind, I'll come in. So the reason, and probably speaking on us all here, the reason we've got charges in the ground at the depot is probably twofold. One, it's familiar for our people. So on a night it comes in and the same thing kind of happens. The other thing is that we the lack of opportunity charging and the risk of somebody else being sat on that charger when you get there is more of a deterrent. So that's why I in particular are aiming the vehicles at what they can do in a single day, and not relying on something what when you get to it is somebody's either sat on it or it doesn't work. And it still goes back to this: you can put a charger wherever you want one, but you've got to still get the power to that charger. So it's a route, it's a postcode lottery of where the ideal fix is. So I don't know, Matthew, Peter,
yeah.
you got any more on that?
Yeah, I think I experienced that we've got. So in the Netherlands, we've got a huge amount of opportunity charge that's going on, and what you end up doing is you potentially have additional buses because we run a relay. So a bus turns up, you park it, upcharge it, you jump onto the bus that's next door to it and drive away. The reason we do that is because it's cheaper to buy spare buses than it is to have drivers sitting 20 minutes inactive and not operating, because obviously drivers is a high cost. So you've got to think about one way you can get the power, but two, how you're going to run that. Obviously, if you've got heavy duty routes, you might need to upcharge, but if you could design your routes that come back to depot and do some fast charge at depot, that might be a better solution than putting upcharge into the streets.
I think from our point of view, the other thing I'd call out is some of the challenges around electrifying things like some of the rural routes, which are going to be really challenging. In some ways, the project we've been doing at the moment, the projects we've been doing are typically the routes that are easy to electrify. There are going to be some challenges later down the track when we start thinking about some of the more challenging routes. How do we electrify those? Now, opportunity charging may be part of the answer there, but going back to the point that both Garry and Matt have made, quite often the juice isn't where we need it, and particularly if you're talking about rural termini, then they may not have the capacity to charge at the speeds that we need for opportunity charging.
Great, thank you for insights from all three of you on that. We've got 3 minutes left. I've got one last question from Sol Gold, who's from Safety Telematics. It's actually asked the question I was going to ask, which was, are you seeing a difference in driving behaviour and approach of drivers regarding electric vehicles? I drove a gas vehicle in the past, and it was a completely different experience for me. So, what are you seeing anything from your drivers? Are your drivers getting feedback, positive or negative?
I'll jump in very briefly. Very positive. I think the driving experience is there. I think it's a different experience, but they enjoy driving it. And I think we recognise training is essential. You cannot just jump out of a diesel into an electric bus and expect them to know how it behaves and how to drive, things like braking conditions, everything else like that. It's a very, very different experience. So it's you've got to think safety first, train your drivers, and then they'll love driving them.
Yeah. Garry, are you finding that you need driver familiarisation on that?
Absolutely, I agree completely what Matthew just said. Full of everybody loves to drive them. It's